Okay. Well, let's see, for tonight's president's statement, was with a very heavy heart that we need to share that our friend, our colleague, Rick Lohman has passed. His wife, Barbara, is here tonight, and we're grateful for you being here tonight, Barbara. Rick was, it's hard to know where to start. So I'm not going to try to do very much right now. We have an item on the agenda to honor Rick. Just say that we served with him for many years, and he worked really hard. He showed up a lot. He influenced for the better everything that he got involved with, and he got involved with more than almost anybody I know. And for the people I know who've been as involved as someone like Rick was, we can all thumb wrestle about, nobody's going to thumb wrestle about who did more, because the kind of people, Rick is the kind of person that we all valued tremendously, because we could count on him to do homework, make phone calls, show up to meetings, write letters, say the hard thing, urge us to work harder and do better. So with that, that's all I'm going to say for now, but we do have the item coming up. And if you have thoughts during that item, I invite you to share those thoughts here. And I think it's important and good, and we look forward to what any of you are willing to say tonight. All right. For items that are not on the agenda, do we have any oral comments? Okay. Does anyone wish to pull any items on the consent agenda for discussion? All right. How about a motion and a second for the consent agenda?
Make a motion.
Okay, that was Peter. And
I can second.
And I think that was Bill. Thank you, Bill. Okay, Tracy. Oh, and let me note that Director Slater-Carter is here with us, and has been for a couple minutes, so probably got here right around 7:32. Tracy, could we have a roll call for the consent agenda, please?
Okay. Director Boyd?
Aye.
Director Decker?
Aye.
Director Sofke?
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter?
Can't hear you, Catherine.
Here we are. Yes.
Oh. All right. Consent agenda passes 4-0. Thank you. No old business. Moving on to new business. Item 1, review and possible action concerning remote meetings during emergency conditions under Government Code Section 54953 of the Brown Act.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This is the standard item that we have to adopt, or we have to adopt a resolution that allows us to hold this meeting via Zoom, as well as any other meeting in February. I remind everybody that we will have to switch to a different style meeting by March, after February 29th. And there is an item on this agenda tonight where we discuss once more how these meetings actually are supposed to look like. So the recommendation is to adopt the resolution next in order. Thank you.
So moved.
All right.
Seconded.
And Peter. Tracy, could we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Boyd?
Aye.
Director Decker?
Aye.
Director Sofke?
Yes.
Director Slater-Carter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries 4-0. Let's go to item 2, review and possible action recognizing Rick Lohman for his decades of outstanding and dedicated service to our community.
Yeah, so Rick has been working being a director for Montara Water and Sanitary District since 2019. Before that, he was very active on the coast side since he moved to the coast side in 1991. And that was first under the Granada Sanitary District from 2004 to 2017, quite some time. And he was also under GCD, actually representing LAFCO, I believe, and under MWSD also. So he was the representative for Special District at the local chapter of the Local Agency Formation Commission. He was active at the USDA, as well as very active on the board of the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. First for the Granada Community Services District since 2005, and then with just a 2-year interruption for Montara from 2019 to 2023. I got to know Rick at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side when I had to go in as an interim manager, and that was a very difficult situation. And it was somewhat contentious between the board and staff at the time. And I got to know Rick as a person that was very firm, but very good at alleviating conflict and working ultimately with staff to resolve the issues that were there at the time. And that's how I will always remember Rick, that he was very good in what he did and very eloquent and elegant in getting his opinion and convincing others. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm hoping some of you have some additional things to say, and once we're done with comments, then I'd like to read the resolution.
I echo Clement's comments, and I got to know Rick in 2019 when I joined MWSD. And as Clement just said, he was resolute, he was firm in his convictions, but he was also very intelligent and had a great sense of humor. And that's what I remember most.
Yeah, Jim.
Are you still on mute, Jim?
No, can't hear you, Jim.
I just wanted to add that that Rick, all those things, but he worked as a, he did everything he did as a friend. He was just a friend. He was a friend to me. He was a friend to everybody. He was just a friend to the district, friend to the staff, friend to all of us. He was everybody's friend. We all loved him. We all love him. We're going to really miss him. And I just, his friendship and kindness were so apparent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Let's go to Catherine.
Oh,
Let's go to Catherine. She got her hand up.
Yeah, I knew Rick from pretty much when he got involved in politics in 1991. He did so much in so many different things, and he brought so many different skill sets and observations to bear on whatever he was working on. He was very, very interested in astronomy. He at one time had a big telescope, and every time there was a astronomical event, you could ask Rick what it was, and he could tell you when and where and what was going on with it. He was interested in beer, and he took up making beer, and he made darn good beer. And he made lots of different kinds of beers, and he experimented with beers. And I think all of that diversity of experience led to a lot of his diversity of problem solving in whatever he was doing. He helped, along with several of us, get some design review standards reinstated on the coast side. He was instrumental, for those of you who are new and don't realize it. Some of us worked on a park called Murata Surf. It had been designated for 3-story apartments and commercial stuff. This is that lovely area just to the south of the school in El Granada. Big, wide open spaces on both sides of the highway. It was supposed to be a 3-story commercial arrangement with lots of luxury housing. And somehow the county forgot to mention that they were also going to be allowing second units in it. So I don't remember the exact numbers, but instead of 100 housing units, it was really going to be 200 housing units. And he's the one who put together the phrase, sane growth for the county, sane growth for the coast side. That's not exactly what he said, but he was not a no-growther. He wanted our growth to meet the needs of the public here and of the county, but while preserving our coastal values and while preserving our communities. I can go on and on. I am going to say I'm going to have Rick on my shoulder when I'm doing things, because he did have a smile, and he was always friendly, and he loved to come up with creative solutions. And I'm not going to miss him, because he's going to be with me in so many different ways. I'll miss having him sit at the table, but I'll hear him. I'm sure of it. So, but I just want to thank Rick and his family, who let him do all of this stuff with us, and who have been so involved in the coast side as well. They will continue, I know. And now I'm getting all weepy, so I'll just say, yeah, we need, everybody has a chance to be like Rick. We need more people.
Thank you, Catherine. Bill, I think you had spoken up next. Let's go to you. And then after Bill, let's go to Greg.
I consider myself very privileged to have met him for a brief, a couple of hours in an afternoon, maybe a month and a half ago, for one conversation. But he felt like an intellectual compadre. We got degrees from the same place. He's the first person I've heard since my mother to mention LAFCO. And now I've been reminded what it is and how important it is. And so I'm hoping over the next year, when we're in 3 space having coffee or beer or whatever somewhere, to hear more stories and to be able to soak up a sense of what it was like to be in the same room working on things together, because that's a privilege I haven't had. But I absolutely can tell that I've at least gotten a toe into understanding who he is and what he did, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, Bill. Greg, and then Lisa.
Well, the thing that struck me about Rick was partly his acerbic wit and his dry sense of humor. I think we bonded in part because he was a Caltech foil for an MIT guy, and we shared a level of social intelligence familiar to those of you who know what gearheads are like. I found his reports on stuff from 20 years ago. To Catherine's point, he'd been involved a lot longer than I have. And I appreciated his efforts to keep tabs on LAFCO and that Bartoli guy. And Barbara, he owes me one of his beers.
Thank you, Greg. Lisa, and then we'll go to Rob.
Thank you. Rick he also served on the Midcoast Community Council from 1996 to 2003. I remember him as a steady presence and a support there when I was organizing my community of Pillar Ridge in the early 2000s. Totally knew nothing what I was doing. And the MCC was invaluable support and guidance in working through that to get mobile home rent control for mobile home parks. He offered support and advice for me when I was first elected to the Mid-Coast Council in 2011. He always provided an example of how to effectively serve on our local boards. I mean, this is for someone who my whole life I just was not involved in that sort of thing. And then I got drawn in. So I'm very grateful to Rick. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Rob.
Good evening. My name is Rob Bartoli. I'm the Executive Officer for Cemetery LAFCO, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Commission to offer my condolences to MWSD and to the family for the passing of Rick Lohman. So Rick did serve on LAFCO for almost 9 years, first as an alternate special district member in 2014, and then as a regular member starting in 2018. And we may have had some different viewpoints sometimes on certain issues, but Rick was always a very kind and thoughtful person. And he, as you know, he was a very strong supporter of the San Mateo Coast Side. In my time at LAFCO, I really have enjoyed working with him, and he will be sorely missed by the commission and my staff.
Thank you very much. Do we have any others who wish to speak? Well, then I'll take a turn, and then I'm going to read the resolution that's before us. I'm grateful to be reminded that Rick didn't contribute to just one thing. He was a full spectrum coastal warrior, and he loved the coastside, the people here, the communities that the people comprise, the environment in which we live, and he took as a real duty to be a not only a good custodian, but someone working hard to pull people together to make sure that together the community served as custodians of this unbelievable place that we have the privilege of living. There wasn't a lost cause that you couldn't find Rick helping to lead an effort. Lost causes require creative solutions, and Rick had some creative solutions, some of which drove me bonkers because they were insane, but you could count on Rick to really try really hard because he just had a fire in his belly and he was going to do this job. And I remember many times where he was, shall I say, passionately urging us to find a way to solve certain problems. And yet, you've heard it from others. He was determined to find a way to be a peacemaker, even while he was this passionate coastal warrior. It's such an interesting contrast, but he didn't lose sight of the peacemaking. And I really like the comments that I'm thinking back. I mean, I had plenty of disagreements with Rick, but that's because we were trying to solve problems and we might have different notions of how to go about it. But I can't think of a time he made it personal. And he has made a lasting impression. And like Catherine said, I am confident that it's not going to be that hard to ask and answer the question of what would Rick have to say about this or that, whatever we're pondering, because he let us know what he was thinking about things. So we've got a pretty good training on Rick's approach to things. We'll miss him. We'll miss him a ton. And Barbara, thank you so much. I'm really mindful of how much my family has done to allow me to serve in this role. And I know that you have been very involved in providing a lot of support behind the scenes and making Rick available to us. But I know that you were also joined with him on many of these efforts. And I think you guys made a great team, and we're grateful for you being part of this community and part of the story that we got to share with Rick.
Thank you all. He loved working with you. Gave him a real mission in life, and he enjoyed every minute of it. So I thank you all.
So you're going to read the resolution, Rick?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Rick, on Rick Scott.
Yes,
Thank you.
I am. Yeah. All right. Resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District recognizing Rick Lohman for his decades of outstanding and dedicated service to our community. Whereas Rick Lohman was elected to the Montara Water and Sanitary Board in November 2018, and during that time, he was appointed to serve as President Pro Tem, Vice Chair, and Secretary. Whereas Rick served from 2004 to 2017 on the board of the Granada Sanitary District, after 2014 known as the Granada Community Services District, and was a vital participant in GSD's application to the local agency formation commission to gain parks and recreation powers under a reorganization into a community services district, and was actively involved during the 10-year process until GSD successfully reorganized in October of 2014, and worked tirelessly with GCSD to successfully remove an active sewer line off of the Montara Road pedestrian bridge in Miramar, greatly reducing the possibility of a sewer spill into the ocean. And whereas Rick served over 18 years on the Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside Board, first from 2005 to 2017 as the GCSD representative, and then from 2019 to 2023 as the MWSD representative. And during his tenure served as board chair, vice chair, and secretary treasurer, as well as a member of the ad hoc wet weather flow management project committee and the ad hoc recycled water committee, and played a key role in discussions and progress towards developing a recycled water project at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside. Whereas Rick served on the Mid-Coast Community Council as well as the San Mateo County Local Agency Formation Commission prior to his service on the Montara Water and Sanitary District Board, and continued to serve on the LAFCO committee for MWSD. And whereas Rick has been an active community leader and a well-known local environmental and community activist since moving to the coastside in 1991, throughout the last 30 years, he displayed his passion for and dedication to the coastside community, to its improvement, and his avid support for recycled water, smart water supply planning, openness, financial and environmental responsibility, sustainable development, and maintaining local public utilities at high levels of efficiency under local control. And whereas Rick's strong leadership and support of the district and the communities of Montara and Moss Beach has served as a superior example to others and enabled him to make significant contributions to the many achievements of the district prior to and during his tenure on the board. Whereas the district has significantly benefited from Rick Lohman's service on numerous standing and ad hoc committees of the board, such as Budget and Finance, Connection, Strategic Plan Progress, Planning, CSDA, and Aqua. And whereas this board desires to express its gratitude and appreciation to Rick Lohman for his leadership and devotion to duty as a board member and district officer. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the board of the Montara Water and Sanitary District, a public agency in the county of San Mateo, California, as follows. This board does hereby recognize Rick Lohman for his exemplary and dedicated leadership and service to the Montara Water and Sanitary District and the greater coastside community, and does hereby express its sincere gratitude and appreciation of him in that regard. The district clerk is hereby authorized and directed to transmit a copy of this resolution to Rick Lohman's family. So can we have a motion and a second for that?
I will make the motion. Oh, I'll make the second.
Okay. So I hear Peter with a second from Catherine. Thank you. Do we have any further discussion? If not, Tracy, let's have a roll call, please.
Okay. Director Boyd,
Aye.
Decker,
Aye.
Aye.
Senator Carter.
Yes.
All right. The motion carries. And thank you, Clemens, and the folks who contributed to that resolution. Very well done. Thank you very much. Tonight, I'll just say in advance, we will adjourn the meeting tonight in Rick's honor. And for now, we have a little more to do, so let's go on through the agenda. Item 3, review and possible action concerning vacant position for Board of Directors. Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So Rick's passing creates a vacancy on the board. And now the remaining members may fill this either by appointment or calling a special district election within 60 days of the vacancy. And the relevant government section, code section, also requires us to notify the county elections office of the vacancy within 15 days. That's 15 days after the board is notified of the vacancy, or the effective date of the vacancy, whichever is later. This meeting item now serves as a notification to the board of the vacancy, and therefore constitutes the vacancy date for purposes of complying with the government code requirements. So we notify this board tonight. Should the board decide to fill the vacancy by appointment, the person appointed will hold office until the next district election cycle. That's effectively almost 2 years now. This is so because the vacancy occurred within the first half of Director Lohman's term of office. Election happened in November 2022. And it's before the next general district election cycle in November 2024. So the person appointed will hold office until the next general district election. Once a person is elected to fill the vacancy in November 2024, he or she shall hold office for the unexpired balance of the term of office that was vacated, which in this case would be the 2-year unexpired term of Director Lohman. So it's essentially split in 2 terms. Should the board decide to fill the vacancy by calling a special district election, then the election is required to be held on the next established election date, that is 130 days or more after the date the board calls for the election. Per the County of San Mateo election website, the next established election that would be 130 days or more is March 5, 2024. There's no election scheduled for 2023. So if the board decides to call a special election, the district must notify the county elections office of its decision within 60 days of vacancy. That's no later than April 3rd. Moreover, election costs and expenses associated with a special election would be borne by the district. If the board chooses appointment, the appointment must be made no later than April 3rd, 2023. District must post a public notice of the vacancy in 3 places within the district, and the notice may include an invitation for interested persons to submit a letter of interest to the president of the board and or other specifics about the appointment process. So that recommended schedule calls for making the appointment at a regular meeting of the board on March 2nd, or if necessary, March 16th. Which is the last regular meeting before the April 3rd deadline. Now then, the district must notify the county elections official within 50 days of the appointment. If the board fails to make the appointment or call a special election within the time required, the County Board of Supervisors may make the appointment prior to 90 days after the vacancy occurred. So our past practice here at MWSD has been to fill board vacancies by appointment. So we have 2 recommendations here, 2 paths. So authorize the general manager first when they don't notify the county elections official of the vacancy, regardless. We ask tonight for the action to determine whether to fill the vacancy by appointment or special election. If it happens by appointment, we have to first authorize staff to immediately post a notice of vacancy in 3 places within the district, including the Half Moon Bay Review, district website, and approve the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District that is attached here, essentially resolving to fill the vacancy on the board of directors by appointment. And then the vacancy has to be filled no later than April 3rd. If the board decides to go with a special election, then we are asking to authorize staff to notify the San Mateo County election official of the board's intent to fill the vacancy by special election no later than April 3rd, 2023.
Okay. Let's see, do we have any public comment or comments or questions from the board?
No, I suggest we proceed with the tradition appointing somebody onto the board.
I agree. Do we need a motion and a vote to announce to the county this vacancy? Clemens, is that what I heard?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Can
Do
you
we need a motion and a vote to direct you to inform the county?
That's fine by motion, but we would also ask to adopt the resolution.
Yeah. So Catherine, we would just do it with a motion to adopt the resolution.
Okay, I move that we adopt the resolution to inform the county.
I second.
Yeah, okay, so Catherine and Bill, thank you. Do we have any further discussion on the matter? I'll just note, this is, as Clemens pointed out, and others have pointed out, this is our regular practice. We haven't had a whole lot of vacancies, but this is what we've done before.
And
right.
in this resolution, is this where we make the decision? I'm sorry, I'm a little absent-minded tonight. Is this where we make the decision whether we want to do an election or an appointment in this resolution?
Yes, as written, the draft resolution is for making an appointment.
Okay, I move that we notify the county and that we fill the vacancy by appointment.
I second that too.
Okay, so my understanding is that we're moving for the resolution as presented in the staff report. All right, Tracy, could we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Stofke,
Yes.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Okay, the resolution is approved by a vote of 4-0. Let me just note now that this board has expressed its intent and desire to find someone willing to stand for appointment to this board for a term of roughly about 2 years until the next election. And our community has many wonderful people in it. And if you have not considered serving before, now is a time not only of opportunity, but of need. And we have had some excellent people step forward in years past, some who have received an appointment and others who have not, but we have been grateful for everyone who has stepped up when the need has arisen. So if you've thought about it, now's a good time to think real hard about it. And the next step would be to put your name forward. We'll be putting out a notice that says exactly what to do. It's pretty easy. And I hope to see some people, hopefully at our, what was that, the March 2nd meeting, Clemens?
Yes, March 2nd or March 16th.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can get it done by March 2nd, but no later than March 16th, because we don't have a regular meeting before the April 3rd deadline after that. All right. Okay, next item is review and possible action concerning water rate and sewer study.
Yeah, thank you. Very glad we have this item up. There is quite a bit to talk about. We actually got the authorization to move forward with a water rate study in November 2022 and have worked in the background to bring this item now to the board. We have not raised the water rates since quite some time. Alex is going to lay all the details out and repeat some of what I'm saying right now. Alex Handels with Bartle Wells is here and will make a presentation tonight. We also have, on the sewer side, we actually were able to implement 9% rate increases over the past 3 years. That was very necessary to catch up, particularly with the increasing expenditures at the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. We have a clear understanding that these costs continue to rise. Unfortunately, it is not only the inflation that we are currently seeing everywhere that hits us very hard, but it is also clear through, for example, the recent storm events that a lot of infrastructure needs further attention, further replacement. We're hoping, of course, to get some of those improvements funded through other mechanisms, be it through grants or loans. However, loan situations, of course, have gotten worse. That is also true for the water side. And on the water side, so we are really right now at a point where I'm looking for a decision from the board to move forward with both rate studies at the same time. The sewer rate study has essentially a deadline. We have to have this in place essentially by the next fiscal year, by July 1, to be able to get the collection through the San Mateo County tax officer, get all of this handled in time for the next fiscal year. So there is a deadline associated with it. It does make sense to move forward with the water rate study at the same time right now. Again, we have not raised rates in quite some time on the water side. However, we implemented the water system reliability charge. That is a restricted source of money that can only be used for infrastructure improvements, for capital improvements. That has allowed us essentially to build a bid reserve, and it allows us to move forward with, I'm going to say, not reactionary improvements, but with planned capital improvement programs, hopefully on an annual basis. We now own the water system 20 years, almost 20 years. In August, it will be 20 years. And it's about time that, in the past, we financed a lot of improvements through, for example, the outstanding bond funds, through loans, through other mechanisms. I think it is really time that we're getting the right rates a bit adjusted so that we can fund improvements essentially as we go. Well, another discussion that I would like to see in this context here is how the rates actually are structured. First, we have a 4-tier rate structure currently, and that is really designed to for water conservation. We also have a fix between the variable rate, that's the water consumption rate, that's a tiered portion, and a fixed component, that's the standby charge. And that split is currently 70% on the volumetric charge and 30% roughly on the fixed charge. Our expenditures, however, are mainly fixed expenditures. So this is another mechanism that really is essentially encouraging conservation by placing a focus on water conservation to be able to essentially save the customer's funds. I don't see necessarily that we have a great need for encouraging our customers more to conserve water. Of course, this is going to be an issue during droughts. However, our water consumption is relatively flat, regardless summer, winter. under a COVID scenario or not. It's a relatively flat consumption. So I think there are other mechanisms also available to encourage conservation. So I want us to think a little bit about the general concept of rates that we have. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex, who's going much more in depth than I can to talk about this. Alex.
There we go. Thank you, Clemens. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, what I have is like just a real brief presentation, so hopefully won't bore you too much with some of this financial and rate stuff. But it's been a little while since we've had rate discussions with the district, so we just thought it was a good idea to bring everyone back up to speed. Give a quick refresher on where we've come from and what you're facing, and talk about some very preliminary findings that we're seeing, and want to hear from the board, understanding that this is not the be all end all here. We're planning to come back again, but just to kind of get the process started and get folks initial input and guidance to make sure what we're coming back with is in line with something the board would be comfortable with. So with that, let me share screen here if I can, and let me open this up. And can folks see this?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of what we're going to cover, just real quick background on the finances, water and sewer rates. We've got some certain issues we wanted to, bring up for board consideration and input at this stage, and where to go from here. I'll finish with, but again, this is very preliminary. We're just, giving some background. We want some initial input, and any questions folks have, we can get into more detail. Happy to respond to anything. So please interrupt me at any point as well, I should say, if you've got any questions. But the basics, I'm just going to start with the utility finances. You've got a water fund and a sewer fund, and they're both self-supporting enterprise funds. And yeah, you get a little bit of side revenues from things like property taxes and some connection fees, et cetera. But really, it's your service charges that are the main source of revenue that you have. All those revenues, the water rates have to fund water. The sewer rates are legally required to fund sewer. So the money's not going anywhere except for water and sewer funding. And the key thing is, it's the rates, in my mind, that really underpin everything you need to do from an operational and capital standpoint, because that's where most of the money comes from. So it's the rates that underlie your whole stewardship of your water and wastewater system. When we look at what the district's done over the years, kudos to the board and prior boards, very strong financial management and staff. From my perspective, you've been raising rates, you maintaining reserves, you're doing forward-looking financial planning. I think everything that you should be doing. I work for a lot of agencies, and a lot of them ultimately will do the right thing, but there's often a lot of hesitancy to move forward with rate increases as opposed to being proactive about it. But what I've seen from this board is the desire to be proactive while, understanding that, there's a balance of objectives in everything you do. So I think you guys have done a great job in terms of your water rates. Looking back, over 10 years, the district had been doing small annual inflationary rate increases almost every year. For about 10 years. And then, a few years back, it was realized we started looking at the rates again because the old rates had run their course. And we're seeing that there's, the district had a lot of capital needs, particularly for, replacing and rehabbing aging infrastructure. You've got a lot of old facilities in these coastal conditions. You did some initial funding of some critical improvements with the GO bonds when you acquired the water system. You've done some financings, but you, like many agencies up and down California, have just got a lot of old facilities that are approaching the end of the useful life. They haven't needed that much investment maybe over the last 20 years, but there's kind of a tidal wave of, replacements that are going to be coming forward. What ended up with it, instead of raising rates last time, it was decided, hey, let's create this dedicated source of funding, a water system reliability charge, it was termed, and that was implemented starting July 1, 2020. It generates about $1 million per year, which is fantastic. It's helped put your water enterprise on a much stronger financial footing. And because you did that, you haven't had to worry about the little inflationary rate increases over the last couple of years as much. And to be honest, a lot of agencies kind of put aside rate increases during the COVID period, intentionally or not. But looking forward, we see you've done that for a couple of years, kind of deferred rate increases, but we think it would be prudent to get the district back on course with these small inflationary annual rate increases. Keep your rates in line with your cost of service, keep up with cost inflation. And in my mind, there's not like a single correct thing. Sometimes we'll do these rate studies and you need to get your rates up by 82% over 7 years, whatever it is. In this case, it's more of like prudent financial management. Costs are increasing, you need more revenues, and it's always wisest to proactively do that with small gradual increases rather than deferring those increases. We've seen a lot of agencies try to do that year after year. Can they get by with another no rate increase for one more year? And the answer is sure, you can get by, but what they're doing is slowly digging themselves a financial hole, putting off the little rate increases, and in turn creating a bigger political problem down the line. So I always recommend the small gradual approach. And again, there's not an exact right answer. What we were looking at with the cash flows, updated financial projections, rate increases somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. And also I'll mention in the past, the way the district has adopted some rates, when you do the Prop 218 process, that establishes maximum rates, and you certainly have the flexibility to implement less if ever warranted. So the district's done that with some prior increases. They kind of adopt a maximum and they kind of phase in towards it over a number of years. But in the big picture, rates are a now or later game from my perspective. The more rate increases you do now, it means the less you're going to have to do down the line. The less you do now, the more you're going to have to do later. So there's never a single correct answer, but it's all about proactive financial management. In terms of the water system reliability charges, as Clemens mentioned, these are collected on the property tax rolls. So it's like, it's not on your ongoing water bill. We know that the amounts that you're currently collecting, while they are a huge step in the right direction, they're not the be all end all, because the analysis from Tanya and company was showing, with all the infrastructure out there and what its expected lifespans are, that it's really closer to $2 million. It's kind of a rough estimate of what you'll need to invest over the long term. Doesn't mean you have to be doing that today. So we know additional increases will be likely at some point. And one of the things that I remember bringing up last time that I think some of the board members at the time liked the sounds of was that, maybe when your general obligation bonds reach final maturity in August of 2018, those are going to be coming off the tax rolls, because those GO bonds are also paid on the tax rolls. The bonds for the acquisition of the water and initial improvements of the water system, which have been, refinanced over the years at lower rates. But so at the time when those are falling away, that might be a good opportunity to, look at bumping up the water system reliability charges to increase the funding for the long-term repairs and replacements without having a huge impact on the ratepayers, since they'd be seeing, the fall away of the bond payments. On the sewer side, we observed the same thing. You went, a decade or so with small annual inflationary adjustments each year to keep your rates right in line with your expenses, which was great. Going back, 2018, there's kind of a newfound observation that, wait a minute, this treatment plant that we've got at Sewer Authority Midcoast side is aging. It's been working, but it's hitting the end of its useful life, like many treatment plants up and down California that were put in around the time of the Clean Water Act. They were built, they've been working, but now they're approaching the end of their useful lives, and your plant's operating in a little more extreme coastal conditions. There's been analysis done that, it's $40+ million is probably what should be invested over the next 5 to 10 years. I know there was a consent decree that was looking at about $8 million of improvements for the intertie pipeline. So there's a lot of funding needs at the SAM facilities. and also at the district's own facilities, just like your water pipelines, you've got a lot of old sewer lines. Many of them have been there for, very long time and are just going to need reinvestment to replace and rehab. The last rate increases went through in 2018, as Clemens mentioned. It was 3 years of 9% increases. The prior 2 years was even higher than that for a couple of years because the board had started down the path. And when we did those 9% rate increases last time, the 3 years, the understanding was that those were not the end game again, but those were steps on a path. So they were kind of you needed more rate increases, but there was kind of a desire to phase it in as gradually as possible and keep it single digits if possible. So you've done those have been implemented. And my initial, take is we haven't, really started a full-blown rate analysis on the sewer side, but I went back and looked at the prior financial projections, and they assumed that those 9% would be continuing for at least 4 more years with, some smaller rate increases after that. So it's kind of like you were taking steps in the right direction, and you're going to need to continue taking steps in the right direction, both for your own facilities, similar to the water side. Newt Engineering, Pippin and Company had looked at the asset replacement lifespans and come up with a similar number, about $2 million a year over the long term would be needed for your own collection system and lift stations and pipelines over the long run. So you're kind of facing that on the sewer side. The need to raise rate increases a little more imperative and keep those moving in the right direction, especially considering what's going on with Sewer Authority Midcoast side and its pending capital needs. So that's kind of a background. The issues we wanted to get board input at this stage, again, it's preliminary. On the water side, something in the 3 to 5% range. Is that something the board's comfortable with? Are there any preferences there? Again, considering more rate increases now means less later. And if you were to go with more on the Prop 218, let's say in the 5% range, you always can implement less. You just can't go the other way around. We didn't know how many years the board was interested in looking at rate increases. Historically, some agencies have tried to do a year at a time, but we think it's much more prudent to do a multi-year increase so you don't have to come back and revisit it. And then you come back periodically and, reevaluate and, readjust and set course for the next period. Last time you did sewer rates for 3 years in a row. It's, common for agencies to do 3 to 5 years of rate increases with the Prop 218. In terms of when these rate increases go into effect, I think on the water side, the soonest you can get them in effect is probably about June 1st. Historically, you've done them on July 1, the beginning of the fiscal year. Some agencies like to stagger them with their sewer rates. So the sewer rates go into effect in July, the water rates on January 1. But some of those agencies, or many other agencies out there, are in a little different situation where they see huge swings in seasonal water use, with the water use doubling in the summer and being low in the winter. So they want to do the rate increases when water use is low. That's not the case here on the coast side. There's, minimal outdoor use, and your water use doesn't change that much from month to month. So there's not really a critical need to do that on January 1 when the water use is low, because it's not. Clemens mentioned some potential rate structure modifications. Your rates have a fixed charge and variable charges with 4 tiers. On the water side, it's about about 1/3 of the revenues from your water rates alone come from the fixed charge, about 2/3 currently from the volumetric side. Meanwhile, as was mentioned, it's about 90% of the costs are fixed. So most agencies are in a similar boat. They don't have their fixed costs fully covering their fixed expenses, or it'd be like a single fixed charge that we covered almost everything. So your rates are kind of right in line with what a lot of agencies have with their fixed volumetric mix. You also have a lot of other fixed charges, property tax revenues. You've got your water system reliability charges that are 100% fixed. So when I look at the overall balance, you're probably getting about 60% of your revenues fixed, 40% volumetric. But we didn't know if that's something that board was interested in changing. I know for a lot of other agencies I've worked with, due to the impacts of the drought and cutbacks in water use, they've been looking to gradually increase their fixed revenue recovery, so to minimize their vulnerability to financial hits if there is a drought and water use, mandatory cutbacks from the state, whatever happens. The other thing was potential changes to the tiers. When I look at your tiers, the breakpoints seem very logical in terms of how the water use works. We didn't see that there needed to be any clear changes to the tiers, but that said, you used to have 2 years, a little over a decade, you went to 4 tiers. We didn't know if the board had any, behind the scenes preferences or desires to change anything at this stage. I don't see any compelling reason to change, but we can certainly look at it if anyone wants us to. On the sewer side, again, we haven't really done we haven't done updated analysis yet, but we're going to be doing so very quickly here. But my initial take was looking at what happened last time and looking at your budget, forging ahead with something like 9% increases would be, probably a prudent thing to do. You've already done some significant rate increases, so you're starting for a much healthier base than you were 5 years ago. So that gives you the flexibility to continue phasing in rate increases. And finally, with the 218 process, with all this stuff, there's no single right way to do it. Initially, when we started looking at this, we were looking at doing water rate increases first and then doing sewer rate increases. But with the timing of all this, needing to get sewer rate increases by July 1, I would suggest it makes more sense to probably have a single notice. Some agencies, on rare occasions, they think it's going to be less political pressure if they bifurcate water and sewer. But in your case, I don't think you're going to get any more pushback one way or the other. Most agencies I work with, including many on the peninsula, if they do water and sewer, we typically do the water and sewer rates at the same time via a single notice. And it goes through the same frequency as other agencies that try to separate these things. So that really covers what I wanted to talk about in terms of the rates, in terms of the schedule. Again, we want to get everyone's preliminary input. If there's things they want to see when we come back to the board, I think our tentative plan, and this is all, the board wants to change the schedule. This is just preliminary. We'd want to come back in March with some, preliminary findings and recommendations for board consideration, and potentially look for board direction to move ahead with the Prop 218 process for raising rates. And to refresh everyone's memory, what that entails is you have to send notice out to all the property owners / ratepayers of what the proposed rate increases are, and inform them of the date, time, and place of the public hearing at which you're going to consider the rates. And you can't hold that hearing until at least 45 days after the notices are mailed out. And consistent with Prop 218, water and sewer rates are not subject to any vote from the public. These are essential services, but they are subject to something called majority protest, meaning if more than 50% of the property owners on their own submitted written protests, that would stop you from being able to consider a rate increase. But it's rare that happens, but it does. It has happened with some other smaller communities I've worked with when there's a lot of, organized angry opposition. But what I've seen in the past here is it seems like the folks I've heard from the community, we know no one likes rate increases, but have generally been respectful of the board and its role being from the community, trying to balance the objectives and prudently manage the financial utility. So if all this went forward, we came back in March and got the direction, you can get the notices out by the end of March and potentially hold a public hearing in May to get new rate increases in effect by, June, July 1st. But there's certainly more time available if we wanted to come back for an additional board meeting or so to further vet things. So that will conclude what I was going to cover. I'll turn it back over to the board and to the staff.
But before we get it back to the board, I just want to mention there is one more source of funding that we haven't mentioned yet. It's a smaller portion. Those are the connection charges that the district receives for essentially new connections that are issued or increases in fixture units, for example. My recommendation is that we first move forward with the rate studies However, at a later time this year, also look at our connection charges and see if there is a need to adjust. So we have not looked at them in quite some time, both on the water and the sewer side. So once we have better clarity, particularly on the sewer side, on the upcoming costs, I think that makes sense. And with that, back to the board.
Okay, so let's go first to Peter and then we'll go to Bill.
The thing that struck me in the rate study is the shortfall in our reserves for the water. There is a number of 522,000, which probably should be closer to 600,000 if you take the loan payments into account. Even if you increase the rate by 4% a year, you will need anything from 8 to 12 years, going from 4% to 6%, which is really too long of a period to catch up. On the other hand, we face the public, and the public expects a certain amount of rate increase, and we want to do it in steps. But to hold off on these rate increases is doing everybody a disservice, because it is clear that our reserves are not there where they should be. So I find the rates for water too low, the increase. I think I would look more to a 6% increase, just like CCWD has done. I know there's a lot of replacement still coming of old pipes. We have seen during this weather that pipes can break anytime in view of their age. And we have now reached a stage that we should seriously consider upping our reserves for exactly that. So that is my first comment. The second thing is that the sooner we put these new rates in place, the better for both water and sewer. That's all for now.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Let's go to Bill.
Thank you. First of all, I need to acknowledge that I have about 100 times less experience in this business than any single one of you, which means about 1,000 times less experience than all of you together. So this really is a question rather than an opinion. So I agree with absolutely everything which has been said about the financial principles and all of that stuff. My only differential is my profession was designing algorithms for about 20 years. So this is structurally the kind of problem that I would program into a computer as part of my daily job. And there are two pieces I haven't heard mentioned, and it might be because they're just legally not feasible or practically not feasible, hence the question. But in my ideal mathematical world, one could declare that, for example, for the next 5 years, we will have all of our rates indexed to inflation. And exactly how that's done is another question. But the idea of indexing what we are charging precisely to the changing thing, which everybody knows is changing, would first of all make it much more predictive of what we need. And second, it would make it even more clear to the public, because if we say the rate went with inflation, then to first approximation, everybody knows, well, inflation was this much and therefore the rate is this much. So it would introduce a conceptual clarity, which I value, but I don't know whether that's possible. And so I'm wondering whether it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. There was some provisions kind of written into the government code going back, I'm thinking about 5, 6, 7 years, that authorize agencies to, instead of adopting specific increases, to authorize automatic inflationary adjustments or automatic pass-throughs for wholesale costs. However, I'll point out the times where that makes sense is when you already have your rates at exactly the right level that covers everything. And with water and sewer rates, there are a lot of unknowns. It's not just that the costs go up. You don't know necessarily what your revenues are going to be from year to year, because use can change. Your use has been pretty steady, but it can go up and down. So you really don't know what the revenues are going to be. The property taxes revenue can change from year to year. with the ERAF funding, this education reform.
Reimbursement Augmentation Fund. It's an uncertain
can vary from year to year. Yeah, and it can go away. So it's hard. You can do that, and also you may have some other financial challenges, like wanting to, as Peter's mentioned, not just do inflation to cover costs, but also have something in the rate increases, even if it's a little extra, to aim to build up reserves, to have a little more funding in case you need some emergency pipeline repairs, something of that nature. So there's, again, what I say, there's no right or wrong, but what you've mentioned is something that some agencies do. Some agencies actually I've worked with have had a CPI plus certain percent, because CPI is, again, with all urban consumers, it include someone's buying chicken and rent and gas for their car, which water and wastewater districts are very labor and capital intensive. And there's actually some other indications have shown that the regular CPI is lower than what real cost inflation has been facing most water and sewer agencies. So yes, you can do it. You can do it for 5 years at a time, but again, it's a balance of objectives. You might not want it. You might want to do it. You might not want to do it. But good thinking on that. Yeah.
The principle I'm invoking is that if you can reasonably predict the average increase, the mathematical optimum is to aim at that increase so that the variability is fluctuating about it. That's literally a law of nature. And I would hope that that principle is incorporated in the study, at which point we can decide whether to do it.
I think you just made an excellent point. And I mean, this is what I preach to agencies all the time. Let's look long-term and set course in the right direction, understanding there'll be a little variance each year, and you'll be taking steps in the right direction. Is it exactly perfect where you're going to be 5 years down the line? No, but you'll be in a much better position. And then you could reevaluate and, continually adjust course as needed. But with that same principle, let's look and, aim steady, gradual increases in the right direction. That's what this board has also had done in the past for many years, until, the larger rate increases in recent years.
All right. Let's go to Greg, and then after Greg, Catherine.
So thanks, Scott. I emailed most of you a few hours ago a set of detailed thoughts on this matter, and then I realized several of you had not received a copy of that email, and I just sent that to you. I'm not going to attempt to cover all the points I raised, but I do request that you consider the points and that I have a chance to discuss them in Finance Committee meetings and before a detailed proposal gets to the board. Of course, I agree rates must go up as they are elsewhere, and I do share Alex's thoughts that MWSD is more proactive, open-minded, and better managed than other agencies. But according to my analysis, you're still behind the 8 ball by about $41 million in reserves. This puts you in better position than many of the other agencies that I compared in an analysis I did. When I say behind the 8 ball, I mean in order to avoid borrowing. And of course, borrowing has changed. With interest rates now at 5% and 6%, you more than double the cost of an asset if you have to borrow to fund. So I'm not going to say anything hard and fast about whether you're going to borrow or not, but the idea that you would spend half your capital improvement budget in fees to financial services institutions and lenders instead of investing it in assets in the ground is something I think you really ought to take seriously. And you don't have to take my estimate for the numbers. I provide some detailed instructions on how the district could do its own assessment of its asset inventory and come up with its own estimate. The problem stems from assets being on the books at costs from decades ago for both you and everywhere, and those assets are often further reduced by inflation. But the current replacement cost of those assets is multiples of what they're on the books as. In addition, because you're in a joint powers authority, as the other members of SAM are, the SAM assets are sort of hidden from your observation until they become current expenditures, because none of the agencies that own SAM keeps the SAM assets on their books at their share of the $150 million of value that that institution represents. So it's it's quite likely it's a surprise to everybody. Now, I don't believe the numbers shown on Alex's draft are adequate for expected capital improvements. That can be confirmed in detail with Sam as you see their 20-year plans and so forth. But the most important message I want to give is how you analyze the adequacy of your reserve position, and that it matters because borrowing is going to be a killer. So you need a longer-term financial model, longer than the 5 or 10 years that Alex is talking about, along the lines of the 20 years that Sam began using in 2018, and like the model I built and sent to the district a few years ago, although certainly I expect and encourage you to improve that model. This doesn't need to be a matter of opinion, but merely numerical projections, or to use Bill's term, using an algorithm, okay? I do want to disagree a little bit with Clemens on the connection fees. That's your opportunity to get capital funds. It's very hard to get capital money out of rates. The margin just doesn't normally politically allow it. Some years ago, I analyzed that you had about $130,000 of asset value. That was 2019 numbers for a combined water and sewer connection. I think you ought to raise those connection fees now, not later, but it ought to be analyzed in concert with what you're doing with this model. The sooner you raise those, the better. And as Peter points out, it takes a long time to get the revenue and the derivative margin out of raised rates, but the connection fee income could be immediate. Where did I get all these ideas? Well, they stem from conversations with 2 of the members of the American Water Works Association's Rates and Charges Subcommittee. Why don't I get them to come here and speak and do the rate study? Well, that was interesting. The answer is they don't want to do work in California because of liability and regulatory issues. So the amount of the rate increases is one issue, but understanding how far Montara Water and Sanitary District is from fiscal sustainability is central. Even if you can't close the gap, you need to know how big it is. And then we hope for FEMA and other funds, and you probably saw my email on that. I do expect to be working with the county. I will do everything I can to get money for SAM and MWSD. If I can quote one of the founders of this district, we got 7/8 of the money from the Clean Water Act in the 70s, but we forgot we'd have to replace the plant. The minute you put a pipe in the ground, you have to start saving and reserving for its replenishment. Otherwise, just like unfunded pension liabilities, which I'm sure you've all heard about, you get behind the 8 ball and you can't catch up, and then you're going to get stuck borrowing. So I believe we must plan and reserve for the long term, and I hope and expect to work to get MWSD and SAM the FEMA funds and participate in understanding your situation. I understand the situation politically for setting the rates may divorce from your actual needs, but I think it's important to see just actually what condition you're in. You've heard this before. Thanks for your time.
Clemens, let me ask, were you going to respond?
Yes, I want to respond. And first, I want to thank Greg for his comments and for, we have, of course, heard these comments from you since years. And thank you for your persistency. And you know that we have a disagreement here because agencies have other funding mechanisms. For example, grants. There is different ways of looking at life expectancies, et cetera. So, but one point that you, I think, just made is that the connection charges should be looked at rather soon. And I don't mean to delay this process and look at the connection charges. What I really mean is that we have to focus very quickly on getting these rate studies completed. If we want to do this by July 1, then we should send out the Prop 2NT notices in the beginning of May. And to be able to do all of this, essentially, we need everything in place by the first March meeting, meaning have to bring up the Prop 218 notice in early March to this board to bring this into completion in time. And with that, my suggestion is that we are going to work closely with our treasurer on in this coming month, essentially, to complete this. There may be a need for a finance committee meeting, but this is an urgent matter. So I don't mean to say that we are in need to delay the connection charge study. I think we need to focus for the next month very hard on getting this rate study completed so that we can move forward. Thanks.
Can I respond to his response?
Very briefly, and then on to Catherine.
The connection fee money you will get will be immediate. You need to get that money as soon as possible before a lot more connections are signed up. The revenue you get from the rate increase will come in over the years. There's time to do both, especially if you adopt a simple methodology like making the connection fee a pro rata share of the asset foundation. You have to or should analyze the current replacement cost of the asset foundation anyway in order to do the rate study properly. So just dividing that by the number of connections when you identify it, that's your connection fee. Simple.
Okay, let's go to Catherine. Seeing a frozen video. Catherine, are you with us?
There, I unmuted. I may not be dead. I agree with Peter, and I agree with Greg and Bill. I wish we could just go with the cost of inflation, but different inflationary indexes. And if we look at the cost of living, and the cost of construction has gone up much higher and faster over the few years than the cost of living. So it's a good idea, but it needs to look at all of the factors. The other factor we need to look at is Sam had last 3 years has had major unexpected costs. And some of them came in plant operations, the most in the plant infrastructure. And
I'm sorry to chime in, but
inclusive of all of this.
They're a picture. The sound.
No, it's not our picture. Catherine, if you could turn off your picture, we might be able to hear you.
Yeah.
Also, if everyone could turn off their microphone except her.
Well, I think we're going to wait till she comes back. And in the meantime, I'm going to go to my cell and mention a couple of things. One, I definitely want to take a look at the tier structure. We set it in place for reasons. It's good now that we've had some time to learn how well did that work out. Do those reasons still make sense? Is there a lot of it had to do with incentives around conservation? How is that working with respect to our different classes of large customers? So yeah, I'd very much like to take for you to take a good hard look at that and spend some time with Clemens and staff on really kind of chewing on that a bit, because that was a pretty big deal when we encountered it. And we've had time now to learn from it. So what a great opportunity to go in and see, all right, did we achieve what we were hoping for? Is there something that we could do that would better serve the community? So that's one thing. On the topic of tying to interest rates, Catherine was mentioning that there are different indexes for various different kinds of costs, and cost of construction index is one that we use regularly, Bill, for certain kinds of things where we can tie to the cost of construction index, and it makes sense. There's a bunch of different indices, and we can pick the ones that seem best, but the indices are trailing indicators, and they don't account for the fluid dynamic shock waves that you get, like we've had recently with with the supply chain issues, making things flatly unavailable and watching prices go astronomical, or worse, as if that wasn't bad enough, worse, the unavailability of things that we need to take care of urgent needs, which, you know, as you know, that results in bad things or exorbitant spending to take care of an urgent need. So those things are a little hard to anticipate. You're right that in a controls algorithm kind of way, we do want to, we want to apply that kind of algorithmic thinking to it, absolutely. But it's also part of why we try to work on a frequent enough pace that we can do some of these adjustments towards the targets. I want to go back to Catherine now. Catherine is back. Do you want to take a shot at finishing up your comments? Do that.
Yes, I do. And I will leave my video off. It will help things. I don't know. Anyway, I think there's a lot to do and a lot to look at. I think we need the rates increased. I also think we need to build our reserves. One of the things that people seem to forget is that in the water and sewer industry, many demands put on us by regulatory agencies, financial model when we were working on our rate increases. And yet it's a given. For instance, our old generators used to work just fine. And then the Clean Air Authority decided we had to replace all our generators. Now you can buy a generator for your house for $200 to $500 or $1,000. Generators for sewer and water more expensive. An outlay of cash at any one time, and to plan for this, they just say, oops, we just have generators, so go on, replace them. So I think we need to look at all of those things. Phone call, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Bill, for one short comment, and we're going to wrap this up. We got more to do.
It's a very short one. I understand the fact that there are far more sources of variability, including variability in what we know about variability, but that was my specialty as a data scientist. And the mathematical principle is one that the financial services industry knows. When you have a nonlinearity, like Greg said about borrowing costing more than essentially having your own money, an increase in variability tilts the net average. And if you make a reasonable model of the variability and fold it into the average, you can pitch the average you're asking for slightly above the merely predictable part. And then you now have a better version of the predictable thing to ask for. So every question, every issue which has been raised so far can be addressed algorithmically, but not right now.
Yeah, you say that, and I think of Gretzky. You got to skate to the puck, right? Except your puck has jitter, so that makes it more fun. All right, Clemens, I believe this was for information and direction. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So we'll bring this back at the next meeting, and hopefully get it to conclusion at a subsequent meeting.
All right, terrific. Well, quite a lively topic. We'll look forward. We'll look forward with bated breath for the next round of all of this. I do want to say this kind of all the back and forth, all the different viewpoints. This is vital to us achieving something. I think we all recognize that all of this has an impact on every member of our community. And for us to get there, we really got to wrestle with these issues. I hope any of you watching at home, if you have thoughts, please share them, bring them to the board, bring them to the staff, bring them to any of your electeds. The more the merrier. I think you can see even some of Greg's very strong challenges to what the board's doing are welcome, because we put it all together, and what we come out with will be a hard-fought solution that, we're always like, if you got something better, we want to hear it, because we'd rather do the better thing. In the meantime, we're going to do the hard work. Okay, let's see. I have too many screens and I've misplaced the agenda. 1 second.
Will there be a break at some point?
We are down to reports, and then we're going to take a brief recess, and then we'll reconvene in closed session.
We have one more item. That is the review and possible action concerning the changes to AB 361 and transition to in-person meetings.
Yes, if you could go ahead with that, Clemens.
Yeah, we talked about this already in the last meeting. Essentially, we will have to think about how to get at least 3 directors into a room that is within the district after February 29th. Had some preliminary discussions at the last time, and we're now looking to continue these discussions. And what I'm going to say is that I also have a little bit urgency with this item, because there is the high potential that we have to make some adjustments, purchase some equipment, etc. To be able to do this by the first March meeting, we need a decision on this rather soon. With that, I'm going to give it to the board.
All right. Well, Bill and I already volunteered to get together with you and try to hammer out some of the logistics. One thing you said was into a room, into a location, which, as we've kicked around ideas, could be an outdoor tent or any number of things. The requirement is that we have a quorum. And I was reading, Christine, in your memo to us, you said that a quorum of the board has to be inside the district. I did not see in your note what I expected to see, which would be that a quorum would have to be in one location.
Well, it depends which procedure you're asking about. Let me start by saying that as of February 28th, if the governor terminates as planned the COVID emergency, we can no longer use that as a basis to meet via Zoom, the entire board. So our choices are at that point to go back to regular in-person meetings in a location within the district. That's pretty much the bottom line. Mm-hmm. In that case, a board member may call in or Zoom in and attend that meeting as long as their address is posted and they allow the public into wherever they are off location.
And then there's also the provision for individuals under a personal emergency exception, correct?
Correct. Did that answer your question?
I think, as I'm looking, I pulled your memo up. Just in the pre-pandemic section, item number 1. I think the wording suggested something that the Brown Act didn't allow, and it's like the quorum had to be in one location together that the public could join in on. And it was just the wording was at least a quorum of the board must participate from locations plural within the agency's jurisdiction. And so that sounded like,
Gotcha.
yeah, so that was a little different than okay. So, but I get it now.
Got it.
So part of the question, I'll just go ahead and express my opinion. Is part of the question was, do we want to do the work to support hybrid meetings? And I'm an unqualified yes, that the public benefits from the style of hybrid meeting. We've seen pretty clear evidence that our participation rate with the public has been much higher since we've started doing the allowing for participation of our community members via remote. And it also works really well for consultants who do not have the Brown Act requirement to be present. So with that, let me go to the first hand I see, Bill.
Thank you. As I, a non-attorney, read the governor's thing, the quorum does have to be in the same room and not merely on a bunch of different Zoom computers in different parts of the same district. And I assume that's what it meant, but I would defer to the legal interpretation. But I love the idea of hybrid meetings for the public because public is primarily listening to what's going on. They haven't been part of the trust formation circle, and they are not actively making the decisions that we have to make as we listen to each other. But I think our experience with Catherine a few minutes ago, in which I could literally not hear 2/3 of the words she said and got 0 of the nuance and micro expressions, that is essentially ever more evidence of what is already a scientific fact, that interacting interpersonally over Zoom is between 100 and 1,000,000 times worse from a neurophysiological point of view than interacting in person. So I would deal with a tent, although I think our boardroom with an open window and some infrared heaters would be the functional equivalent of a tent, except with better chairs and lighting. So one way or another, I've been talking to Clements already about ways of validating airflow, of ensuring airflow is safe, of making us warm and things like that. But I am, as far as I know, a scientific experiment. I don't know if any other board member has been sworn in remotely, and I have never yet sat in the same place or shaken hands with either Peter or Scott. And I feel deprived because of that. I did get to meet Rick, but he's not with us. And so I personally very much, I feel it is absolutely urgent. And I've been telling my wife, who works on Zoom all day long, that she needs to be able to meet her coworkers too. She's been working for a couple years without ever meeting them in person. And I know from a bunch of very reliable forms of understanding that this does not work in the long term for trust. Yes, you can get the content through words, but you cannot build up trust through Zoom at nearly the rate you can in person. And so I am eager to be in the room with some of you, and I will have a box fan in the window if necessary.
I don't think we disagree as a board. From what I heard from Scott, we can be together as the board, but for what I see, the participation of the public on Zoom is fine, and the participation by our consultants and by our attorney to be on Zoom would save us a lot of money, both in travel costs as well as in time cost.
Catherine, did you want to add anything? Just while Catherine did experience the technical difficulties, Bill, I will say over the years, someone gets an urgent need to go to the bathroom or gets a tickle in their throat and they have to leave the room to go clear it. We have technical difficulties even when we're in person. So the technical difficulties I'm going to put in a special category. Let me finish. As far as in-person and micro expressions, I will be wearing a mask if we're meeting in person. And so you will not get the benefit of some of what you can see from my face now. I mask when I'm in meetings. That's a policy. I'm not changing that. So understand that some of us will be making decisions like that. And I tell you what, I don't like meetings where I have to be doing a whole lot of participation while wearing a mask. I'll do it if necessary. but it's not comfortable. So, Bill?
To that point, yes, I understand that it is your choice to wear a mask, but the difference between someone going to the bathroom and somebody having Zoom cut out is when someone goes to the bathroom, everyone in the entire room, including the person who left, is acutely aware of exactly when they're gone. But while Catherine was speaking, she didn't know that we couldn't hear her. And the asymmetry of communication is a deep technological imposition on nervous systems which evolved for symmetry in air. So I stand by my point, even with you in a mask in a room, that is vastly better for my understanding what you mean than right now.
I'm just going to say it once. I don't need to know that wearing a mask is my choice. When I hear that, I hear what sounds, and I'm sure you don't intend this, but I respond as if that's dismissive. And as a person of science, I'm making an informed decision, and I don't really need anyone's permission or affirmation about my ability to make that decision. It's a tough decision in the day and age where a whole lot of people have grown weary of doing what it takes to protect themselves and others. And it's a bit of a burden to be aware of what purpose that serves and to be the odd one out. So just so you are aware, comments like that may not come across the way that you may have intended. Yes, Bill?
That actually may be reinforcing my point. The Economist article that I included to explain this point earlier, like yesterday, pointed out that because of subtle differences in symmetry and latency over connections like Zoom, practically everyone anything says is perceived as less informed and more hostile than it would be in real life. So I wasn't feeling hostile toward you. I wasn't thinking it hostile. And the fact that you perceived it might be, may in fact be evidence that Zoom disarms and disables trust.
I'm going to let you know that comment in person has the same effect on me as it does over Zoom. And the fact that it's over Zoom is irrelevant to the point that I'm making, that in making the decision to exercise that protection for myself and for the people around me, it's the very nature of what's being said to the person, and it's literally the words. So with that, we have some business to do here. We need to discuss and direct staff. I think we've had some discussion for staff. I would like to suggest that Bill and I and Clemens spend some time together working out some logistical elements and see what we can come up with. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Sound all right to you, Clemens?
Yeah, I'd like to see this as soon as possible, just so that we are able to prepare accordingly. I don't want to get our staff into a bind and have to rush anyone to build, buy, etc. what is needed. So the earlier the better.
I have some time tomorrow afternoon, if that would be useful.
I do too.
I can squeeze that in.
Okay.
I'll make it.
Let's take it offline and figure out a time window, and then we can do something about that tomorrow. So we'll get right on that. I think we've got some pretty good ideas already. I mean, we've all kicked around some, so it's a matter of writing them down and deciding which ones we're going to do, I think. Okay. Let's see. So that was our last. Thank you, by the way, Clemens, for reminding me about that missing new business item. We have reports now. So anything from Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side? Catherine? I give it to the count of 3.
I have nothing to report from Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. In looking at stuff, I am on the FEMA end of things. I noted that FEMA districts, but the county's notice of the FEMA process did not go to special districts. And I only found out about it by looking at the CSDA, because to what I have found, Half Moon Bay appears to be handling the FEMA process for SAM. Now, to Bill's comments about in-person trust, I don't need to be in person to funding and whether all of the elements of the harm caused by the storm will be included. And I'm not sure how public these applications are. So I answered, I think
One thing we know, Bill, when she drops off the call, we're pretty sure. Oh, she's back. Look at that. Catherine, any chance you switched over to a phone call? I think we do well to.
I've been trying to dial in, and
yes, please do. Please do. I think
on both my cable line, both cable line and T-Mobile, and
get Starlink.
Let's go to Greg, talk with Mid-Coast Council, and I bet Greg also has a word to say about Sam. I'm just
yeah,
guessing.
I do. I just got back from that brew and cruise session that Lenny Mendoza held, where he had Senator Becker and he had Chitester from Half Moon Bay and Ray Mueller and a bunch of other people representing aspects of the community and somebody from Caltrans. And after listening to stories of people losing their cars and having all their possessions contaminated with sewer water and having to live on the second floor of their apartments, unable to use their utilities, it seemed like the entire discussion before I left was about the internet and the 911 call access, rather than about the very real risk to health and safety of the water. The only person who mentioned the sewer that I remember was Mueller. And I didn't hear the first thing about stormwater other than from those representing the victims who suffered from it. So on the good news front, you all should have a copy of email I sent back to Adam Eli, who it was announced at that meeting is going to coordinate the FEMA response for the county. So if you don't think you're getting any traction, you can write him directly. I didn't think Sam and Kishen were getting any traction, which is why I wrote Mueller. And so I don't know what Half Moon Bay is doing there, but you can see that I listed a half a dozen things I'd like him to address, and I encourage you to chime in. I'll mention the MCC is looking for qualified candidates, although we now have some, but the in-person meeting requirement may cost us several members of the council who may resign, just so you know. I mean, we're only an advisory board. We've got people with immunocompromised spouses like I have. As far as emergency communications, I'm considering buying some for the MCC in terms of some form of low-grade ham or high-grade walkie-talkies. I'm curious if MCC has any thoughts on that. I would hope you would share them with me so that we buy the right thing. Because when we lost cell phone service and electricity. It sure would have been nice to be able to talk to other council members and coordinate things like people with trees falling on their houses. Going forward, I do expect to be tracking progress on those critical planning and infrastructure issues. Mueller did announce CRISP in public, Coastside Resilient Infrastructure Strategic Plan. And I just conducted a test of hybrid meetings with PCTV. I would say it's going to have some wrinkles and warts that aren't going to be comfortable. Without getting into the details, I will just point out one other thing. PCTV needs a laptop that they'll bring for their camera. And then there was another laptop needed to control the projector. And then theoretically, one of the council members should have a third laptop to run the Zoom controls. You might want to even have every council member have their own laptop, or else you're going to have a screen big enough for everybody in the council to view, to see the people, you know, like we're looking at each other now. So you might want to give some thought to the hardware requirements of hybrid meetings. We've got a screen that's too small. We've got speakers that are coming in handy, but we don't have council laptops. So that's part of the issue. That's it. Thanks.
Greg, let me mention real quick, I sent you a link already to Coastside CERT. They have clear recommendations on radios. And if you work with them, you will get the right thing. There are some really good choices. They don't cost very much and can cover the entire range that you need to do.
I've got their handout. I posted that on the MCC website weeks ago. Is it more than that one-page flyer?
What you want to do is you want to talk to the person who put the flyer together.
Okay, Carrie Tilley.
Recommendations on specific radios.
All right, thanks.
Michelle?
Yes, if you go to my website and put in FRS or ham radio, you will get a great background on what to do.
Even better. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, let's see here. I keep pulling up new tabs and losing my agenda. Okay, let's see. CSDA or LAFCO report.
Can we hear? Can I make a request that we hear?
Yes,
can I make a request that we hear Catherine's statement again, please? She's back online, I think.
Catherine, did you get with us on a phone call?
But it was on the SAM report.
The phone unfortunately dropped off as well.
Mm-hmm.
She was connected for a while.
I can give a SAM report. There was no meeting of SAM. It was canceled because there was no quorum. So we had a gathering at the last SAM meeting. And in the gathering, we brought forth the charges, the $400,000 and some that we needed for immediate repairs to the intertie pipeline here in Montara. And we overall discussed other expense, $700,000 worth of expenditures that were coming up for the repair of the damage done at the SAM plant. And that was pretty much it. No decisions could be made. So it was basically an informal meeting rather than a regular board meeting.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Michelle, I see your hand still up.
Sorry.
Okay. Catherine, are you with us? I think if you're on the 775 number, it's muted.
Okay, I am unmuted on the phone. Yes, I'm on a 775 number. Hopefully the cable will land.
Way better. Thank you.
Good.
We were asking if you could cover you were talking about SAM when things got bad. So could you cover that again?
Well, yeah, Sam has been doing a good job. The crew has been doing a fabulous job on trying to clean up after the storm. They've been working with Half Moon Bay on the FEMA application. But as you may or may not have heard the pieces, I discovered after going to the CSDA website that that FEMA does offer direct applications for special districts, not just cities. I am very disappointed to discover that the city of Half Moon Bay was notified and that the county only notified cities and not special districts of their ability to participate in these FEMA rounds. I hope we have not missed any deadlines, but I think we need to keep asking for a full public record of what the county is doing. There have been some things stated by some in the city that do not reflect what I have found in online data reflecting PUC and the dam overflow. So I think we need to keep a close eye on that. For the public, there are potentially tens of millions of dollars worth of fines on some of these breaks. And there are millions of dollars worth of things that need to be fixed. So we desperately, as a small community, coastal community from Half Moon Bay through Montara, SAM needs to get full funding. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Clements?
I want to just confirm what Catherine said, that indeed there was no communication from FEMA to the coastside special districts or SAM. I want to thank Mas from the city that he forwarded actually some of the communication to us. However, it's my understanding that there was no response to what SAM actually sent. So there is definitely a barrier and not a good communication between FEMA and the local agency.
All right. Catherine, do we have anything for the CSDA or LAFCO reports?
No, nothing to report.
Okay. Christine, anything for the attorney's report?
No, nothing to report. For the minutes, though, if I might just mention that due to Catherine, Director Slater Carter's conflict of interest, she will not be participating and will recuse herself from the real property item in closed session for 770 Hart Street. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christine. Any director's reports? No? Clements, anything from the general manager's report?
Yes, we do have actually a brand new newsletter that is already up on the website, but didn't make it into the board packet. I will send it out to the full board tomorrow.
Great, good news. Thank you. Any items to capture for future agendas? All right, we're in the home stretch here. So we are going to, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to take a moment of silence, and then we will go into recess. We'll come back after a break and into closed session. We'll thank the public for joining.
I see that Michelle has her hand up still.
Yeah, it's been up for a while. Michelle, is that?
It's actually up for real.
Oh, okay.
Chris, sorry, it's up and down. But CRISP, have you guys heard of that yet? That's Ray Mueller's new acronym for Coastside Resiliency, blah, blah, blah. Have you heard of that yet?
No, but you ought to add a SD to it so it includes special districts.
I think it does. But the idea is...
I helped him name it. So yes, it's Coastside Resilient Infrastructure Strategic Plan.
There you go.
And he keeps forgetting to say it right. I talked to him about that last week. But he's on top of it. That's the important thing.
And he's getting one shoreline to do the GIS analysis as well.
Okay. All right. I'm guessing we can read more about that on Coastside Buzz.
We will try.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. When we come back into closed session, it will be board and staff only. Public, we will already thank, but we will be discussing a few items. Let me run through them quickly. There's the Conference of Legal Counsel on existing litigation in two cases. One is the City of Half Moon Bay suing Community Granada and Montara. The other is Montara suing Dow Chemical. It's a long-running case. And then we've got a couple of potential cases of anticipated litigation, and then conference with real property negotiators on two different properties, 770 Hart Street here in Montara and 771 Rivera Road here in Montara. Then we've got a couple of items, public employee performance evaluation and conference with labor negotiators with respect to our unrepresented employee, the general manager. All right. We are going to go into recess. Let's take a moment of silence, and then I will end with thanking the public. So in honor of Rick Lohman, someone who served with great honor, distinction, and perseverance. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Participation in civic duty is an honor, and I'm really glad you were all here tonight. Let's reconvene in closed session at, let's make it 9:37. Let's give ourselves 10 minutes.
Good night.
Good night, Tanya. Good night, Peter. Good night, Tracy.
Night night.
Good night, Alex. Good night, Moon.